years. Is there any other discussion?
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman.
Senator Markey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to start by taking a moment to set the record straight on the motion to authorize a subpoena to the Massachusetts Port Authority. This subpoena motion is a fishing expedition into the Massachusetts government. It is unfair, unnecessary, and unprecedented, and it leads this committee down a very dangerous path. First, let's be clear. There are no migrants sheltering at Logan Airport, none, and there have been none since July of 2024, 8 months ago. This issue is resolved and over. Second, congressional committees, including this committee, have historically authorized subpoenas as a last resort, only after repeatedly attempting and failing to obtain voluntary compliance with a party. While I understand that Massport did not respond to the chairman's letters last year, before he was chairman, they have since agreed to voluntarily respond to his written questions by March 10th, 5 days from now. And yet we're still wasting time and resources with today's markup. And finally, this subpoena authorization is extraordinarily broad, requiring Massport to turn over documents and communications involving numerous public and private entities in Massachusetts. Yet the chairman first requested these documents and communications just last week. In other words, we are wasting time and resources litigating an issue that is already resolved with a cooperating party on a request for documents first made just 10 days ago. This is no way to conduct a congressional investigation. And at the same time, this committee is ignoring critical issues that are within our jurisdiction. Let's take aviation safety. On Thursday of last week, you can hold that up, please hold it up higher. Elon Musk tweeted, here's what he said last Thursday. To be clear here, the Verizon communication system to air traffic control is breaking down very rapidly. The FAA assessment is single digits months to catastrophic failure, putting air traveler safety at serious risk. The Starlink terminals are being sent at no cost to the taxpayer on an emergency basis to restore air traffic connectivity. The situation is extremely dire. Extremely dire. Air traffic safety. Hair on fire from Elon Musk inside of the computer system, getting all the information he needs. That's what he's saying to our community. We could have another accident. It's dire. Instead, we're talking about a cooperating entity that is willing to cooperate with the committee on information requested only 10 days ago. This is 5 days ago. This is 6 days ago. This is from Elon Musk. He's saying we could have an air tragedy. We could be losing hundreds of people in an air tragedy. The situation is dire. Where's the subpoena to Elon Musk? Where's the subpoena to the acting head of the FAA? Where's that hearing? That's what we should be having right now. Let's put that information out. Let's do whatever we can do as the committee of oversight to ensure that the resources are there, that this is corrected. So if ever there was missing a forest for the trees, this is what we're doing in the committee here today. And so we've got the Cassandra-like warning. It's about as scary a message as I have ever heard. People are getting increasingly afraid to travel on planes, and the guy in charge of the oversight is saying that they should be afraid. Is that the message the Commerce Committee wants to be sending to the American public, that they should be afraid to fly, that conditions are dire? that it could be catastrophic. Instead, we're talking about something that ended last July and that the entity is willing to cooperate. I don't think that's a good use of our time. I don't think that's a good use of our time. Let's have that hearing. That's why I sent a letter to you, Mr. Chairman, and to the ranking member on Monday of this week, requesting that Elon Musk appear, requesting that I will have an amendment. Yes, I will. I will have an amendment. But that, to me, is what this issue is all about. And at this point, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, Senator Markey, are you?
Well, I'd like to first
Yes.
make amendment number one, Markey number one, yes. If the amendment could be called up, I'd like to call up amendment number one to the Massport subpoena.
Please proceed.
Okay. This amendment narrows the scope of any subpoena to Massport to the written questions that the then ranking member asked Massport last year. As currently drafted, the subpoena authorization is breathtakingly broad. It would give the chairman sweeping unilateral authority to demand documents and communications involving numerous public and private entities in Massachusetts. In fact, the chairman first made the request for these documents and communications last week. Let's review the timeline. In March of 2024, then ranking member Cruz sent a letter seeking written answers to questions to Massport. It wasn't until Monday of last week, just 10 days ago, that the now chairman substantially expanded that request in a subpoena schedule provided to Massport. In that schedule, the chairman stated his intent to seek a vast amount of documents and communications from Massport related to migrants sleeping at Logan Airport. And he requested those documents dating back to January 1st of 2021, years before the incident that the chairman is purportedly investigating even occurred. This isn't the good governance investigation that the committee has historically been known for. This is a fishing expedition. And I understand that the chairman is frustrated that Massport did not respond to his questions last year, but the motion as drafted is not limited to those questions. Markey Amendment number one would fix that by limiting the scope of the subpoena to those written questions in the chairman's March of 2024 letter. And I firmly believe that even with my amendment, that this subpoena authorization is unnecessary and a waste of this committee's time and resources. And as I said, there are many more important issues that we should be debating in this committee as we're sitting here right now. But at the very least, the committee should not be authorizing its chairman, no matter who that person is, to demand communications and documents from a state entity that it requested for the first time just 10 days ago. So I just would ask my colleagues, in fairness, to not just Massachusetts, but to any state, to not allow any committee to say that after 10 days that there can be a subpoena issued by a congressional committee. It's just not fair. It should be limited just to the request which the chairman made last year, and I ask for support on my motion.
Well, I appreciate Senator Markey's remarks in support of aviation safety, and aviation safety is most certainly a priority of all members of this committee on both the Republican and Democrat side. I will note Senator Markey made a reference in his remarks. He said that there have been no more illegal aliens housed at Logan Airport since July of 2024. That remark is in error, and I'm going to read from a Boston Globe article dated September 17th, 2024, substantially after July of 2024. The headline is, Migrant Families Return to Logan, Raising Questions About State Shelter Restrictions. On Monday night, about a dozen Haitian migrants slept in Terminal A. And without objection, I'm going to enter this article into the record. The senator from Massachusetts spoke passionately about concerns for aviation safety, and yet as we sit here, this committee does not know the answer to a great many questions about the longstanding practice of Logan and the Biden administration of housing hundreds, perhaps thousands of illegal aliens in airports meant for the traveling public. How many security incidents occurred with illegal aliens being placed in airports? How many women were assaulted by illegal aliens housed in public airports? How many children were assaulted by illegal aliens housed at Logan Airport? How many of the illegal immigrants housed at Logan Airport had criminal convictions? How many had convictions for homicide? How many had convictions for rape? How many had convictions for child molestation? How many were members of violent gangs that have now been designated as foreign terrorist organizations? Of the illegal immigrants that were housed in airports, how many of them had weapons? How many of them had weapons within the security perimeter? How many of those illegal aliens attempted to access secure areas of the airport, such as the tarmac or other places that are designed to keep the traveling public safe? In response to that, the senator from Massachusetts has no answers because none of us have answers. Because Massport will not answer those questions, and what they are fighting tooth and nail against is actually producing the documents that have been requested. The senator from Massachusetts suggested that those documents were just requested 10 days ago. That is not correct. The March letter was not the only correspondence with Massport. On August 9th, 2024, which is a lot more than 10 days ago, I sent a subsequent letter detailing the documents they were to preserve and explicitly stating that preservation was so they could be subject to compulsory process. Massport could have avoided this hearing today by doing what Bonterra did and doing what Newpoint did. This is not a secret. They knew how to avoid the subpoena. They could comply. 2 of the 3 who were noticed did that. Massport did not, which to me raises the inference that those documents, the answers to the questions I just laid out, are even worse than we might be imagining. If they are not, Massport could provide those documents. Senator Markey's amendment would take away this committee's ability to get those documents and answer those questions. And so I would urge members to vote no on Senator Markey's amendment.
Mr. Chairman, okay, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you,
Senator
Mr.
Markey.
Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I have your letter from August 9th of 2024, which you just made reference. And just so it's very clear, that letter that you sent to Massport on August 9th of 2024 did in fact ask for a preservation of documents, but it never asked them to be provided to you. You did not make that request. You did not make that request. So it's inaccurate to claim that you ever sent Massport a letter asking them to provide you documents. You never did that. A document preservation letter is not the same thing as a document request letter. They're 2 separate things. So just to make it clear, if you want to make that motion to request those documents, make it. Have this committee deal with that issue. But you have never asked for it. And it's unfair to ask Massport or any regional airport authority to be asked to now pay a penalty for something that they were never asked to do. It's just not right. It's not fair. So just to me, and again, I ask that your letter be included in the record.
Without objection.
So that it's very clear that you never asked for the documents or any communications. You're now seeking communications as well. Was never made in this letter.
So I would note, if the burden is somehow unfair or unreasonable, somehow JFK managed to comply, somehow O'Hare managed to comply, somehow Bonterra managed to comply, somehow Newpoint managed to comply. The only entity that is refusing to comply is Massport. And in the August 9th letter, I will read what it says explicitly. Quote, if you refuse to answer a question or produce documents, state so specifically and provide the reason for your refusal. In similar circumstances, failure to answer such congressional inquiries has resulted in Congress compelling parties to respond. Massport has understood that compulsory process was on the table at least since August 9th of 2024. Senator Cantwell, did you have additional comments?
Yes.
Well, again, Mr. Chairman, if we limit it just to August 9th, which is what my amendment does, then I think you're within the purview of this committee's, I think, responsible use of its power. But you never made a request to provide you any documents that, or communications from the Port Authority. So I just think it's unfair. There's no due process here. This is just a violation of fundamental due process for Massport or for any subject of any subpoena that will ever come from this committee.
Okay.
You made the
Senator
request.
Cantwell,
You made the request last Monday for these documents for the communication. It is unfair then to say that you 10 days later are going to issue a subpoena, and by the way, notice this within the same week that you made the request. It's just unfair because the request is comprehensive, it is very broad, it's a fishing expedition, and there should be given to Massport or any entity ever subpoenaed by this committee a reasonable amount of time in order to respond.
Apparently, the senator from Massachusetts believes it is a fishing expedition to want to know if violent criminal illegal aliens threatened or actually committed acts of violence against the traveling public. That strikes me as right at the heart of this committee's responsibility. I would note the senator has already had 15 minutes arguing for this amendment, and we have issues with maintaining a quorum. So does Senator Cantwell have any comments on this?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if I could, and I appreciate Senator Markey offering his amendment and particularly the clarity of that last point, which is, you know, Mr. Chairman, you brought up several times these other issues, these other subpoenas, these other activities, which aren't really related to airports at all. So comparing apples and oranges and saying the process and the compliance is had no problems, I mean, it makes no sense. And I think what people are looking for here is a standard and a mark by consistency. Having been on the committee for many years and seen many subpoena operations and opportunities, people are always trying to crystallize what exactly is it that people are after, what information. So when I think the senator from Massachusetts is making a point that when you send a letter that basically asked a whole variety of questions from your staff, basically sending a letter last year asking for lots of questions to be answered, is different than actual subpoena documentation. Yeah, we know this well from our committee from a couple of different aviation safety cases, that being specific about what documents you're actually requesting and the chairman actually requesting those are a very different answer than sending emails to a company saying, please answer 45 different questions. And so we're trying to be crisp here in what legal process we're really going to ask for and vote on. But now that you've asked for that documentation, they are saying, we're going to give it to you in 5 days, by next Monday. So I just want to clarify on the underlying point, Mr. Chairman, there are no migrants. This is an issue that stopped last July. Yes, you brought up an article. My sense is that Logan Airport is quickly responding to that. These are not people that were in a non-secure area of the airport. They were not on the other side of TSA. They were not wandering around about to get on flights. And
Does Senator Cantwell know that, and how do you know that? I don't.
That is our communication from the airport and other airports.
Would the gentlelady yield, please?
Yes.
This is a letter from Massport to the committee. It comes from Richard Davey, the Chief Executive Officer and Executive Director of Massport. Here's what he says. Thank you for your response. I also wanted to make clear that Massport will respond to the questions already presented on or before March 10th of 2025 and respectfully ask the committee to forego issuing subpoenas until you have seen our complete response. March 10th is Monday coming up. So can we at least wait until we see what they've voluntarily sent you before we begin to have a process here of subpoenaing additional information. That would be just the minimal request I would make, just a postponement until next week of this
So I would say
deliberation.
two things in response. Number one, this was not one single question or one single email. Rather, this was two separate, detailed, formal letters on letterhead as the ranking member of this committee, specifying precisely the documents that were sought and the questions that were sought. And in between, there were 9 separate communications. Massport stood as an outlier. Everyone else subject to this oversight complied. Massport believed it is not subject to this committee's jurisdiction. That belief is in error. And I would note, Senator Cantwell said a minute ago, well, now Massport is going to comply. No, they are not. They are saying they will answer the questions, but they are adamantly refusing to hand over the documents. The documents that have been requested, they are not handing over. And I'll note finally, this vote is not to issue the subpoena, but rather an authorization to issue the subpoena. If Massport wants to avoid the issuance of a subpoena, it has a very easy path forward, which is it can provide the documents that will answer the questions about how federal funds were misused and how and to what extent the flying public was endangered because of the political agenda that was being imposed on the airport. And with that, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Thune,